They said I murdered her husband. I still remember the cuffs biting into my wrists, the way everyone's eyes in that courtroom looked at me, not like a man, but like a beast. She stood there, tears painting her face, whispering lies so perfect the jury wept for her. My lawyer told me to plead guilty for a lighter sentence. But how do you confess to a crime you didn't commit? 20 years, 20 winters behind concrete and steel, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat turning hollow. My mother died believing her son was a killer. My fiancé married someone else. Every breath I took in that cell was borrowed from the man she'd buried alive. But now I'm free. Cleared. Vindicated by the truth she never thought would surface. And I've had 2 decades to plan the only justice she'll never forget. They said the courtroom was public, but it felt like a cage built just for me. The air was too heavy to breathe, every whisper in those benches felt like it carried my name. I could hear them: monster, liar, killer. Words sharper than any blade. I remember gripping the wooden table in front of me, its edge digging into my palms, as if pain could somehow keep me anchored in reality. She sat 3 rows back. Emily. Her hair was tied the same way she used to when we were younger, neat, perfect, deliberate. Her eyes met mine once, for less than a second, and I swear I saw something flicker behind them. Not sorrow. Not guilt. Something colder. Calculation, maybe. The kind that only appears when someone knows they've already won. The prosecutor's voice was smooth, theatrical. He painted me as a jealous friend, a man obsessed with another man's wife, driven by rage and rejection. Every sentence he spoke built another brick in the wall closing around me. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, this is not about chance. This is about motive, passion, and murder. My lawyer, poor bastard, barely believed me himself. He told me it was her word against mine, and that no one would side with the man covered in someone else's blood. They said they found my fingerprints on the weapon, but it was a hammer from my own toolbox. Her husband had borrowed it days before he died. But who cared? The jury didn't. The cameras didn't. They only saw what she gave them: tears that glistened under the courtroom lights, a trembling voice that cracked just enough to sound human. When she took the stand, she looked so fragile you'd think the truth would shatter her. He threatened him, she said. He told me if he couldn't have me, no one would. Her words twisted in my ears. Lies so clean they almost sounded holy. I wanted to scream. To tell them how she had been the one calling me every night after the fights with her husband, how she came to my place that one time, begging for a way out. But if I said that, I'd be the monster they already believed I was. The verdict came like thunder: guilty. I don't remember standing. I don't remember my mother's cry. I just remember the sound of the gavel, and the world collapsing inward. As they led me away, I turned once more toward her. She didn't cry this time. She just lowered her gaze and whispered something only I could hear. Now you'll know what it's like to lose everything. And she was right. I did. But what she never knew was that I'd spend every hour, every minute, every heartbeat of the next 20 years memorizing that voice. So that when the time came, I could return it to her, word for word. The first night in prison, I didn't sleep. Not because of the noise, though there was plenty of that, but because silence had suddenly become a luxury I could no longer afford. My thoughts screamed louder than any cellmate ever could. Every creak of metal, every clang of a distant gate closing, sounded like the world reminding me it had locked me out. They threw me into a shared cell with a man who'd carved his crimes into his skin, tattoos of faces and numbers I didn't dare ask about. He looked at me once and said, "You got the eyes of someone who didn't do it. That means you're gonna break first." He wasn't wrong. I did break. Just not the way they expected. At first, I tried to prove my innocence from inside. Letters to lawyers, appeals that went nowhere, interviews that never aired. People stopped writing back, friends, family, even my mother. When the warden called me to his office one day and told me she'd passed, I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something inside me had already gone quiet. Years blur when every day looks the same. I learned the sounds of the place better than I ever knew the sounds of my own home: the morning count, the rattle of meal trays, the soft scrape of a shiv being sharpened somewhere nearby. You stop fearing death after a while. You start fearing time instead, because it doesn't kill you. It drains you, one heartbeat at a time. But even in there, Emily never left me. I saw her face in the ceiling cracks, in the reflection of my metal tray, in the shadows that slid beneath the door at night. She became my ghost, not because she was dead, but because she was alive and thriving while I rotted. On my 15th year inside, something changed. A new inmate came in, a scrawny kid with a nervous twitch and a job in the prison library. He brought me books sometimes, old crime novels mostly, and one day he handed me a newspaper clipping. "You might want to see this," he said. It was about her. Emily. The woman who buried me alive. She was speaking at a charity event, Justice for Victims of Violence. My picture was in the article too. They used my mugshot, next to her radiant smile. My stomach turned. I folded that piece of paper until it was small enough to fit under my skin. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and whispered something I hadn't said in years. "I forgive you." But forgiveness isn't what it sounds like in the movies. It wasn't peace. It was the start of something else, colder, quieter. The kind of forgiveness that clears space in your soul for vengeance. 5 years later, the truth would find me, not because anyone wanted it to, but because guilt has a strange way of rotting its host. It started with a letter, no name, no address, just 4 words written in shaky handwriting. She wasn't supposed to. The envelope was yellowed, creased, as if it had traveled a long way, not through distance, but through time. No return address, no name. Just my prison ID scrawled across the front in trembling ink. The guard slid it through the bars like it was nothing, just another piece of paper among the hundreds they deliver every day. But the second I touched it, something in me knew, this wasn't nothing. I sat on the edge of my cot and stared at it for a long time. My fingers wouldn't move. In prison, news rarely comes as a gift, it comes as a weapon. Finally, I tore it open. 4 words. She wasn't supposed to. No greeting, no signature. But those words. They bled meaning. They felt like the start of a confession and the end of a lie. I read them again, and again, until they stopped looking like words and started to feel like a heartbeat, hers or mine, I couldn't tell. I showed the letter to no one. You learn quickly in prison that truth is just another form of currency, and I wasn't ready to spend mine yet. For days, I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was some sick joke. But then came the second letter, a month later, slipped under my cell door during night shift, when no mail ever arrived. This one had more. I was there that night. She said it was just a scare. He wasn't supposed to die. My hands trembled. I could almost hear Emily's voice through those lines, calm, convincing, careful. I knew her patterns. She always used other people to do her dirty work. Always left her fingerprints on their souls, never on the weapon. I read that letter until dawn, until the words started burning holes through the paper. Then I hid it inside the lining of my mattress. That night, for the first time in 15 years, I dreamt of the outside world, not of freedom, but of unfinished business. Weeks later, I received a visit. A woman in a gray suit, older, tired looking, her badge half concealed under a scarf. She introduced herself quietly. "Detective Laura Chen. I've been reviewing cold cases. Yours stood out." I didn't trust her, not yet. I'd been studied, questioned, pitied before. But her eyes were different, sharp, restless, like someone who'd stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. She pulled out a small folder and laid it on the table between us. Inside was a photo. A crime scene I knew too well. But there was something I'd never seen before, a second set of prints. Smaller. Fainter. Never catalogued in the original report. "Your case file was tampered with," she said. "Someone wanted it closed fast." My throat tightened. I didn't need to ask who that someone was. Emily had always been good at making things disappear. When the meeting ended, the guard came to escort me back to my cell. But before I stood, the detective said one last thing, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "She's not untouchable anymore." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat the next day. My heart beat differently now, not with despair, but with direction. For 20 years, I had been a ghost waiting for my own grave to open. Now I could feel the earth shifting. The dead don't stay buried forever, especially when the living owe them blood. Freedom didn't come with applause. It came with a cheap suit, a manila envelope, and a bus ticket that smelled like dust and rust. They said the evidence cleared me, new fingerprints, new analysis, new truth. But it wasn't truth that opened those gates. It was exhaustion. The system had simply run out of ways to keep pretending. I stepped outside after 20 years and the sunlight felt wrong. Too bright, too clean. I dreamed about that first breath of open air for so long, but when it came, it burned. The world had moved on, phones became smarter, buildings taller, people colder. My city looked like a stranger wearing familiar clothes. The halfway house they sent me to was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on a narrow bed, staring at the peeling paint, and realized I didn't know how to sleep without the sound of locks and footsteps. The silence wasn't freedom, It was a different kind of prison. I was out, but every cell door I'd ever heard still echoed inside me. 2 days later, a letter was waiting for me at the front desk. No return address again. Just 3 words this time. She knows you're out. I didn't need a signature. I could almost see her handwriting, elegant, deliberate, merciless. Emily. The woman who'd turned my life into a life sentence. She was still watching. Still in control. I spent my first week outside tracing ghosts. I visited the street where I'd grown up. It was a parking lot now. My mother's grave, unmarked, because she couldn't afford more. The old garage where Emily's husband used to work, boarded up, graffiti covering the walls like scars. Every place that once had a heartbeat was silent now. She'd taken everything that made me human and turned it into dust. Detective Chen called me that weekend. She said the investigation was ongoing, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She knew I wasn't interested in courtrooms anymore. I wasn't looking for justice, I was looking for balance. I rented a small apartment downtown, cash only, no questions. Every night I walked the streets I used to know, listening. Watching. Gathering pieces. Emily's name was still everywhere. She'd built a charity, a foundation for victims, the same way a wolf might build a church for sheep. She had money, influence, a husband who smiled too easily. The news called her a pillar of the community. I called her unfinished business. One evening, I saw her for the first time in 2 decades. She was giving a speech, standing under golden lights, dressed in white. The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. And then, just for a second, her eyes flicked toward the edge of the room where I stood in the shadows. She froze. The words on her lips stopped mid-sentence. Her smile faltered, barely noticeable to anyone else, but I saw it, the tremor beneath her calm. The ghost she buried had come back. That moment wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was just a whisper, a promise between us. I'm here. And I remember everything. They called her Saint Emily now. The newspapers wrote about her like she was made of light, survivor, philanthropist, advocate for truth. But I'd known her when she was just flesh and blood, when that same smile hid things that could rot a soul. The night I saw her again, she was surrounded by cameras and applause. Her every gesture choreographed, her voice warm enough to melt sympathy out of strangers. But beneath all that polish, I saw it, the small twitch in her jaw, the way her hands tightened when she thought no one was looking. She'd seen me. And for the first time in 20 years, she didn't control the narrative. I didn't confront her that night. I slipped away before her speech ended. I wanted her to feel it first, the uncertainty, the quiet dread. The feeling that the past she buried had started to breathe again. Over the next weeks, I learned everything about her new life. Her home, a mansion behind glass walls. Her second husband, a businessman, polished and naive. 2 kids, a perfect family, a life built on bones. I watched from a distance. Always close enough to see her, never close enough for her to see me. One evening, I left a letter at her doorstep. No name. No signature. Just a single photograph, the one taken on the night her husband died. The same one used in court, the one that put me behind bars. Only this time, I'd circled a small detail in red ink, a reflection in the mirror behind her. A woman's hand. Her hand. The next day, the news showed her leaving her house early, no smile, no cameras. She was rattled. I could tell. I'd cracked the glass. Detective Chen called again. You've been near her, haven't you? I didn't answer. She sighed. You got your name cleared, but don't confuse freedom with permission. Detective, I said quietly, permission was never part of my sentence. That night, I sat in my car across from Emily's charity office, watching her through the window as she worked late. She wasn't alone. A man entered, tall, expensive suit, hands that didn't belong in this part of town. He gave her a file. She didn't thank him. She just nodded. I saw something pass between them, fear. A week later, the man was on the evening news. Dead. Apparent overdose, they said. I didn't believe it for a second. Emily was cleaning house. She'd built her empire out of ashes, mine, and now she was burning her own to keep the smoke from showing. I broke into her old house that night, the one she'd abandoned years ago. The air still smelled faintly of her perfume, something expensive and cruel. In the attic, under a layer of dust, I found a box. Inside, letters, photos, notes, and a voice recorder. I pressed play. He wasn't supposed to die, Emily. Then make sure he stays that way. Her voice. Clear. Cold. Unmistakable. I stood there in the dark, the recorder still playing, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt something close to peace. Not because I had proof, but because I finally had her voice, admitting to the crime she'd spent half her life denying. The angel's face had cracked. And underneath, there was nothing holy left. I didn't go to the police with the recording. Not because I didn't want justice, but because justice had already proven itself worthless. I'd handed them the truth 20 years ago and they called it a lie. This time, I wanted something they couldn't file away in a cabinet. Something that left scars, not paperwork. Revenge, I realized, isn't rage. It's patience dressed in purpose. I started small. Her world was built on image, a tower of mirrors, so I began by cracking the reflections. Anonymous donations stopped appearing in her charity's accounts. Then came the whispers online, forged invoices, missing funds, irregularities in the foundation's books. I'd spent years in prison reading about manipulation, control, psychology. People think inmates rot behind bars. Some of us study. Some of us evolve. Within weeks, journalists started asking questions. Not accusations yet, just curiosity, the kind that makes powerful people sweat. And Emily, for all her poise, hated curiosity. She'd built her empire on absolute control, and I could see her starting to lose it. The next move was personal. I mailed her husband a copy of the photo, the same one from the night of the murder. No note. No explanation. Just the picture. I knew curiosity would do the rest. When you plant a seed of doubt in a marriage, it grows fast, fed by silence. A week later, I followed him after work. He went to a bar, alone, sat for hours staring into nothing. The next morning, tabloids ran photos of him leaving their house without his wedding ring. The cracks were spreading beautifully. Detective Chen called again. "I know what you're doing," she said. Her tone wasn't angry this time. It was weary. "Do you?" I asked. "You think revenge will fix you?" "It won't fix me," I said, "but it'll balance the books." That night, I drove to the cliffs outside the city, the same ones where they said I'd thrown the body 2 decades ago. The wind was sharp, the ocean below black and endless. I played the recording again, her voice carried away by the sea. He wasn't supposed to die. I imagined her hearing those same words played back to her one day, not through headphones or whispers, but in front of everyone. Cameras, lights, the same kind of stage she'd used to bury me. But before that, she needed to feel the slow crumble. The way I had. I hired someone, not a criminal, but a journalist hungry for redemption, one who'd covered my case years ago and regretted it. I gave him pieces, financial discrepancies, secret meetings, names of donors that didn't exist. I never told him the whole story. Just enough to make him curious. 3 months later, Emily's charity was under audit. The board turned on her, donors backed out. Reporters camped outside her house. She started canceling events, avoiding cameras, hiding behind tinted glass. Each headline was a heartbeat. Each rumor, a reminder. She'd buried me with lies. Now I was burying her with truth. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The final seed had already been planted, in someone she trusted most. Someone who'd soon realize the woman they loved wasn't a saint at all. By the time autumn came, her perfect world was starting to rot from the inside. I didn't need to touch her now, the rot was doing all the work for me. The news spoke in cautious tones, irregularities, unverified sources, an anonymous whistleblower. They never said her name outright, not yet. But she knew. God, she knew. She'd spent her whole life building walls, marble, glass, reputation, and now those same walls were sweating cracks you could hear forming. Her husband had moved into a hotel temporarily. Her board of directors had suspended operations. Her phone calls went unanswered, her smiling photos replaced with grainy paparazzi shots of her looking over her shoulder. I watched all of it unfold from a distance. Every tremor. Every fracture. It was the same pattern the prison guards used to describe when a riot started, first the silence, then the sound of something breaking, and then chaos. One evening, I parked outside her mansion. The house that once glowed with warm lights now stood dark except for a single room upstairs. Curtains drawn, shadows pacing. I could imagine her there, hands shaking, whispering to herself, trying to understand how the story slipped from her grip. The next day, she called Detective Chen. I know because Chen told me. She asked if you've been in touch, the detective said, her voice tired. She sounded scared. Good, I said. No, Chen replied sharply. You don't understand. Fear isn't justice. It's poison, for both of you. She poisoned my life first, I said quietly. I'm just letting her taste the flavor. That night, a package arrived at my door. No name. No address. Inside was a small velvet box, and a single item, a wedding ring. Hers. I knew it instantly. I'd seen it during the trial when she raised her trembling hand to swear her lies. There was a note beneath it. I know it's you. Stop, or I'll finish what I started. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. After 20 years, she still believed she had power. But that note told me something else. She wasn't just scared. She was desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy. 2 nights later, her husband reached out. Not directly, through a burner number I'd left in the right place. He didn't even ask who I was. He just said, I think I know what she did. His voice cracked. I need to see you. We met in a diner on the edge of the city, the kind where the lights buzz and the waitress calls everyone sweetheart. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion you don't sleep off. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank records, offshore accounts, property titles, all under fake names but linked to her handwriting. She told me she was helping victims, he said. But she was hiding money. Laundering it through her foundation. And there's something else. The night her first husband died, she called someone from a payphone near the docks. Same time the police say he was killed. I stared at the page. It was all there, the missing piece, the proof the world had ignored for decades. When I looked up, he was staring at me with wide, searching eyes. Who are you? I leaned back, let the silence stretch, and said, I'm the man she tried to erase. The color drained from his face. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just nodded once, as if some puzzle he'd been living inside finally made sense. Do what you have to do, he whispered. Just make sure she never hurts anyone again. And with that, he left, leaving me with the last key I needed. Her walls weren't just cracking anymore. They were collapsing. It rained the night I went back to her. Not the soft kind of rain that washes things clean, this was the heavy kind, the kind that pounds the pavement like judgment. Every drop sounded like a clock counting down. She lived alone now. The mansion that once gleamed with laughter and charity dinners stood hollow and echoing. Reporters had camped outside for weeks, but tonight the street was empty, the scandal had exhausted them. I parked 2 blocks away, the recorder in my pocket, the proof her husband had given me folded in my coat. The gate was open. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't expecting anyone, or she'd stopped caring who came. Inside, the lights were dim, flickering. The house smelled faintly of wine and burnt paper. I followed the sound, soft, uneven breathing, until I found her in the living room, sitting by the fireplace. She didn't turn around. I knew you'd come, she said quietly. You've always been predictable. Funny, I said, stepping closer. That's what they said about your lies. She laughed, low, bitter. You think this makes you righteous? You think ruining me will fix what happened? I circled her slowly, the way you move around a wounded animal that's still dangerous. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes hadn't changed. Still sharp. Still venomous. You killed him, I said. And you let me take the fall. Her hand trembled as she reached for her glass. You don't know what he did to me. I know what you did to me. I took the recorder out and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. He wasn't supposed to die, Emily. Her eyes widened. Where did you? Doesn't matter. I stepped closer. You built a whole life on top of that lie. A husband. A career. A halo. You thought if you smiled enough, the blood would fade. Her breath hitched. What do you want? Truth. She stared at me for a long time, then something in her broke. She sank into the chair, her voice small now, almost a whisper. He was supposed to leave that night. I told him to pack and go. He hit me. Again. I called Mark, the man who helped me run the foundation later. He said he'd scare him. Just scare him. Her voice shook. But he didn't stop. He hit too hard. When I saw the blood, I panicked. Mark said we could fix it. Said no one would believe the wife anyway. So he called the police. Told them your name. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Every syllable another nail in the coffin of the life she'd stolen from me. I could have recorded the confession, taken it to Chen, let the system chew on it until it turned to dust, but as I looked at her, trembling, hollow, smaller than I remembered, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't need her to go to prison. I needed her to live the way I had, trapped, powerless, waiting for the next door to slam. So I leaned in close, so close she could feel my breath. I don't want justice anymore, Emily. I want you to wake up every day and remember this: you made me a ghost. Now it's your turn. I left her there, the recorder still playing her confession on a loop, her face collapsing in the dim light. As I stepped outside, the rain hit my skin like forgiveness I didn't deserve. Behind me, the sound of her sobbing mixed with the thunder. It didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like fear finally realizing it had nowhere left to hide. The morning after I left her, the city woke up to ruin. Her confession, the one I'd recorded but never turned in, somehow found its way online. I don't know if it was Detective Chen, or the journalist I'd once fed clues to, or fate itself deciding it was done waiting. But there it was, her voice, calm and terrified all at once, spilling 20 years of lies into the world. He wasn't supposed to die. They'd never believe the wife. Within hours, it was everywhere. News channels. Social feeds. Headlines that didn't bother with mercy. Charity icon caught in murder cover-up. St. Emily, exposed. I watched it all unfold from a diner window, my coffee gone cold, my hands steady for the first time in decades. I didn't need to hide anymore. The truth had teeth now, and it was biting back. Her mansion was swarmed by reporters. Her foundation collapsed overnight. Sponsors pulled out, her accounts were frozen, and the husband who'd once looked at her with disbelief now looked at her with disgust. He gave an interview that same week, voice cracking as he said, "I didn't know who I was married to." She tried to fight back, of course. Released statements. Cried on camera. Claimed it was deepfakes, that someone was framing her. But her voice, her own voice, was undeniable. The world that once worshipped her turned away like she was contagious. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just watched. Quietly. Because revenge isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to feel finished. One evening, Detective Chen came to see me. No handcuffs, no questions, just a look I couldn't read. She sat across from me, sighed, and said, "You did it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "She's under investigation again. This time, the evidence is iron. She'll face trial, real trial, and it won't end like yours did." She looked down at her coffee, then added softly, "You could have destroyed yourself chasing this. But somehow, you didn't." I met her eyes. Maybe I already was destroyed. Days passed. Then weeks. The noise around her death, no, her downfall, grew quieter. She disappeared from television, from interviews, from the world she once ruled. Until one morning, I saw a headline that almost made me feel something. Former philanthropist Emily Rhodes found dead in apparent suicide. They said she'd jumped from her balcony. The same one that looked out over the city she'd fooled for years. I went to the spot later that night. The street was empty. The wind moved through the trees like whispers. I looked up at the ledge, the broken railing still bent, and I wondered if, in those final seconds, she saw my face in the dark. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel regret. Just quiet. 20 years of rage, planning, and waiting, all leading to this silence. The kind of silence that doesn't heal. It just lingers, heavy and endless. I thought I'd buried her truth. But the truth was, I'd buried myself right beside it. I went back to the cliffs the night I heard she was gone. The same place where they said I killed a man. Where my life had ended once before. The sea was restless, black waves slamming against the rocks, dragging pieces of the sky down with them. I stood at the edge and waited for the feeling that was supposed to come, relief, peace, maybe even redemption. But it never did. The truth is, revenge doesn't give you back what was stolen. It only leaves you holding the empty space where forgiveness should have been. I still remember the sound of the judge's gavel, my mother's voice breaking, the way Emily's eyes looked when she said my name in that courtroom, not with fear, but with ownership. For 20 years I'd lived inside that sound, that moment. It became my home. My prison. My reason. And now that it was gone, I didn't know where to go. People think freedom is walking out of a cell. It's not. It's walking into a world that no longer recognizes you. Detective Chen found me there. She stood a few feet behind, her coat whipping in the wind. "She's gone," she said. "I know. You didn't push her." "No." "Then why do you still look guilty?" I turned toward the sea. "Because I gave her the rope. I just didn't pull it." She was silent for a long time. Then, softly, "You could have handed the evidence over years ago. You could have let the law deal with her." "The law had 20 years to deal with her," I said. "It never did." She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she wanted to. "What will you do now?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The world keeps moving, pretending it forgives and forgets. But I know better. There are things time doesn't heal, it only buries them deeper, under quieter faces and better lies. I still wake up some nights expecting the clang of cell doors, the echo of my name being called for roll. I still hear Emily's voice sometimes, not the lies, not the screams, but the last words she ever said to me that night before I left her. You think this ends with me? Maybe she was right. Maybe it doesn't. I left the cliffs before sunrise. The horizon was bleeding orange, the sea turning to silver. I walked until the road vanished behind me and the sound of the waves became nothing but memory. Freedom has a price. Mine was everything I used to be. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Sometimes justice doesn't come from proving the truth. It comes from surviving it.